Welcome back, Fahir here from awesometuts.com, and in this video I want to talk about a concept that is called a function. Now, I talked about them here and we even created one. This is one here. And what is a function actually? Well, a function is a way for us to have a block of code that we want to reuse over and over in our project. Then we group that code in a function, which will make us write cleaner code and it's much easier to maintain and whatnot. Now, I like to group functions in 4 categories. And let's go one by one and break them down. Of course, this grouping is my grouping. I don't think programmers in the world do it like this, but I do it in a way to explain it. So this is much easier for me to explain what it is. So how do we declare a function? Now, there is a function that returns a value and that it does not return a value. So don't worry about it right now. It will be clear in a second. First, I'm going to declare a function that does not return a value. And it begins with void. So yeah, void, this is right here and here and here. So it's already familiar. We saw it once. Void means that function that we are going to create now does not return any values. And now we give it a name of the function. So what the name is going to be, let's say calculate 2 numbers. And this is the name of the function, which again depends on us, same way as with variables. And now we open close parentheses and open close curly brackets. The code that we put between these curly brackets, so this one, and I'm going to write a comment, the code that we put here is going to be executed every time we call this function. So this is a function that's going to calculate 2 numbers and return or print their value. So let's do just that. So we can say here print, and I can say the sum of A and B is, and I can say here plus 3 plus 5. This is going to calculate these 2 numbers, and we can even leave them here in parentheses or put them in parentheses just to make this more clear and not confusing. So again, we are concatenating the result, and here I'm putting in parentheses 3 plus 5. This is equivalent even if we write, for example, int sum is equal to 3 plus 5, and then here, instead of typing 3 plus 5, we simply type sum. So it is going to return 8, and this right here is also going to return 8. But instead of creating a new variable, we're simply doing it here directly. And how do we call a function? Simply call the name of the function. So this function is called calculate 2 numbers. Simply type calculate, and here it is because we have declared it in our project. We are getting autocomplete for mono develop. Simply tap on it and open close parentheses and end the statement with a semicolon. And this is it. So you simply type the name of that function, which is right here that we have declared, open close parentheses, same way as here, and end the statement with a semicolon. So if I go in my project now, and if I first clear the console and run the game, we're going to see the sum of A and B is 8. So the sum of A and B is 8. It's the same even if we use this to simply call it right here like this. It will also work. So like this here. But the point here is to explain what are functions. So this is the first type of function, or how I like to categorize them. This function does not return a value, which is denoted with void, and it does not take any parameters, which is denoted by these empty parentheses. Let's make it more adapting to our needs. Now, this is a function that calculates 2 numbers, but every time we want to calculate 2 different numbers, we need to go here and change, for example, to 6 and let's say to 4 in order to calculate these numbers. But when our program is running, that is not possible for us to do. We can only do that in code. But how can we make this function a little bit more adapting? For example, I don't want to go and change these numbers here. Maybe I want to change the numbers here. Is that possible? Yes, it is. We add parameters to the function. Let's say now I'm going to comment this function out. And here I'm going to remove it because it is giving us a red alert. We don't have that function. Again, comments are not compiled by the compiler. You can write whatever you want and it will not be compiled. So now I'm going to say void again because it is not returning any values. And I'm going to say calculate 2. So calculate 2 numbers. And now I want to have two numbers as parameters here. How do we add parameters, and what are parameters or arguments? They are either called parameters or arguments. And what are they? Well, they are regular variables, integers, floats, doubles, booleans, objects, anything else. Don't worry about objects. We will cover them later on. So let's say we want to calculate two integers, and I'm going to say here int a, comma, int b. What does this mean now? Well, it means that our calculate two numbers function now has two parameters, a and b. Both are type of integer. If we want to only have one, then we will simply remove here int b and remove the comma. If you want to add more parameters, you separate them by comma. So you first type the type of the variable that you want to be as a parameter, then you give it a name. So here I'm going to say comma, and I'm going to say again int b. And instead of typing now the sum of a and b is 6 plus 4, and I'm going to copy this right here just so that I don't retype it. Instead of 6 plus 4, I'm simply going to say a plus b, and this is going to work. So how do we call this function now? Well, we call it the same way. So we call it calculate two numbers, open close parentheses. But now what we need to do, since we have these parameters here, we need to pass them right here. And since they are integers, we need to pass whole numbers. So let's say 4, and now we need int b, and it's separated here by comma, so we also separate it here with comma, so 4 and 8. And now this 4 is going to take the place of int a, and 8 is going to take the place of int b. So this is how parameters work. And we can reuse them inside of that function as we just did right here. So we have int a, int b, and we are reusing them here to calculate their sum. If I go now, we are going to see when I run the app 14, because 6 plus 4, it was 4, I mistake. I don't know math, you see, I don't know math. But I'm mistaken, this was 6 and 8. So 4 and 8, and we see the result is 12. Why? Well, because 4 plus 8 is 12. And I'm using, all the time I'm using sum and a plus b. We can also do this with a minus b. We can do it with a divided by b or multiplied by b. It will be the same. So it will be the same, no difference whatsoever. So this was another type of function that returns no value denoted by void, but takes two parameters. And by the way, you're not limited to only having integers as parameters, and you're not only limited to have two parameters. If you want to have more, you can say here comma int c, comma int d, up to unlimited number of parameters. And as I said, you're not only limited to integers, you can say bool g, string a, and all of these parameters, you can reuse them. And I cannot say a because we already declared a. You cannot have two variables bearing the same name. That is not possible. So now we can reuse the boolean inside of the function itself and reuse the string inside of the function itself. So again, you're not limited to only integers as types of these parameters, and you're not only limited to one or two parameters. There is no limit to those numbers. Another type of function is a function that returns a value. So far, I was talking about this function does not return a value. Now this function returns a value. And what does that mean? Well, let's say, for example, we have a function that is going to return an integer, but before that, it's going to calculate two integers and return a sum. Since we are working with integers, and again, I'm using integers as an example, you can use booleans, floats, doubles, strings, it works the same. So we want to return an integer. Instead of typing void, we type integer int because that's the type of the variable we want to return. And again, I'm going to say calculate two numbers, and here in a function that returns a value, we need a return statement, and it goes like this. Simply type return and now return the value. So we can say 5 plus 6, and it is gonna return the sum of 5 plus 6. We can go here and we can print that. So I'm gonna take this print here and I'm gonna say the sum of a and b is, and remove this from here, and I can simply call the function inside of it. So I can call the function inside of it, and if you're confused why, Well, the reason for it is returning an integer number. This is a function, but when it calculates these numbers, it is going to return an integer. So I can do something like this. I can say here int sum is equal to calculate two numbers, and it's going to work. Instead of using that function right here, I'm simply going to type sum, and it is going to work. If this function is going to return a string, you can do the same thing. So you can type here string, name it, and take the function which is going to return that value. So it's simply returning that value, and you can practically catch it inside of this variable right here. So declare a variable and call the function. It will return that value and put it inside of this variable. So now if I go back here and let me just clear the console first. Go in the console, clear it up, run the project, we're going to see the sum is 11. Even if I remove sum right here and pass again the function itself and delete this right here, it will be the same. No difference whatsoever. If I run it, we are going to again see the sum of A and B is 11. Why? Well, it is returning an integer. And again, I'm repeating the same way it will work for a float, for a boolean, for a double, and a string. So we are not only limited to integers, but I'm using them as an example. This was the third type of function that I was talking about. And we have the fourth type of function, and it is going to be int. This function returns a value, but it also takes parameters. So I'm going to say calculate two numbers, and now this one takes two parameters, or 3 or 4, or however you want, or how many you want. So let's say int a comma int b. And now instead of typing return 5 plus 6, I'm going to simply say return a plus b. So now we don't need to hard code these values, and every time it's going to be 5 plus 6. Now we can simply pass parameters. So I can go here and I can type calculate two numbers, and I'm going to say, I don't know, 77 and 11. And now 77 is going to take the role of int a, and 11 is going to take the role of int b. And here we are adding them up and returning them back. And it's the same concept right here. That's why I can type the function name here, and it will execute along with the print statement. It will concatenate as an integer with this string. Or we can do the same thing. We can say int sum is equal to calculate, and I'm just gonna copy it here so that I don't retype it. So calculate like this, and it is gonna calculate these two numbers, put them in the sum variable, and we can call sum right here the same outcome. So the outcome is the same. If I go here and run our app, we are going to see 88 being printed here in the console. So this is the whole concept of functions, and we have used them right here. So now we have here created, if you remember, move pumpkin. This is the name of the function, and we see it's void. It does not return anything, and it takes no parameters, but we need this code to use it in our update function. Now you're wondering, why didn't I just put this code in the update? Yes, I could have. That could have worked, or it will work even if you put it, but I don't like to put all of my code without grouping it into functions in the update or fixed update, or here in the start or in the awake, because in my eyes, it does not look pretty. Just imagine if, for example, in the fixed update, you have this. So you have this code and maybe another line of code, maybe another line of code. Look at this mess. It does not look pretty, and we can confuse ourselves and even confuse somebody else who takes a look or watches our project. Instead of, we can simply regroup all of this code in a single function and then call that single function. Look at how much prettier this code is. This is much prettier and easier for the eyes. And now if you have any problems, you're going to go inside of this function and then fix that problem. So this was the function that we have created. And also I want to talk about one thing, that is the names of these functions. Now we see here that I named all of these functions calculate two numbers. For example, if I uncomment this one, and let me just go here in Unity editor, we are not going to see any errors. But if I go and type this, void calculate two numbers, and put it like this, if I go back in Unity editor, we are going to see an error. Notice here, it has calculate two numbers is already defined. Rename it or use a different parameter types. What does this mean? It means we cannot have two functions with the same name. And you're like, what? But this is calculate two numbers and this is calculate two numbers. What are you talking about? Well, you see the concept of that function. This is void, it does not return anything. And this is void, it does not return anything. This does not take any parameters and this one does not take any parameters. So it's practically one and the same function, these two. But the difference between these, so notice this one, this is also called calculate two numbers. But this one returns an integer. And it also takes two integers as parameters. It has the same name, but it's completely different function. So it's a different function. It has two parameters and it has an integer. Now don't be confused when I say different. This one calculates two numbers. This one also calculates two numbers. But C# or the compiler is treating them as two separate functions, even though they have two same names. Why? Because of the signature. And I mean with the signature, this one has two parameters. This one does not have any parameters. Even if I go here and I type it like this and I add only here int a, I'm not going to get this error right here because this is a different function. Notice the error has gone away. It's treating it as a separate function because this one takes a parameter. This one does not take a parameter. So this is a good thing to know. Even if I uncomment these two, and all four of them have same names, I don't think that we are going to get any error here. Actually, yeah. Let me just go here, calculate. Yeah, we are getting the same error. So apparently, even if this one is returning a value and this one is not returning a value, they are calculated or they are counted as the same function. So we would need to comment this out. But let me just see for this one. This one will not be counted, I think. Actually, it is. Yeah, because we have practically here, we have the same, but this one returns an integer and this one does not. So in this case, it will not work, but in this case, it will. So this one returns an integer and this one does not return anything. We can have them as same names. So calculate two numbers, calculate two numbers. I just wanted to take this out of the way because I did not see anyone explaining this. Even I did not explain it before, but well, I saw an importance to this in order to explain it because maybe you will need to put same names but have different implementations of those functions for some reason, and it is good to know. Anyways, this was about functions. What are functions? How we can use them? How we can declare them? Fahir here from awesometudes.com, and I will see you guys in the next video.